So the topic is, make it universal.
So we want to talk about leadership and how from the Bible we bring leaders into the world. How are the leaders to behave, or what we look up like to a leader to be and to do.
One of the most interesting things someone said to me in the past 2 weeks, they said, you notice that everyone on social media is a follower. I said, oh, wow. Yeah, everyone is a follower. And in 2008, I had an interesting experience with a soul of a rabbi from my community. He said to me, I asked him what I can do, how to be more effective in what I do. He said the best thing you can do for another human being is help them to become self-sufficient so that they're not dependent on your practice, which means to create leaders instead of followers. How do we create leaders? We allow, we could start as parents by allowing our children to fall on their face, by having the ability and the understanding that if we don't allow them to grow up and we're constantly curbing and picking up after them, we don't engage them in being self-sufficient, they could never be leaders. They become damsels in distress. They're constantly waiting to be rescued, and they're always looking for a handout.
This is something that's very clear in the Bible, actually. There's a portion that explains it introduces a judicial system the way we know it today, judges and law enforcement and all this is they're very real topics that we have in our daily lives. But who are these leaders supposed to follow? Where are the rules and all the norms coming from? They're supposed to be derived from the Bible itself because everything is in it. It's a complete manual that provides all the laws and all the regulations through which the leaders or the judges, the law enforcement should base themselves on. So as people, our role is to be completely engaged and to really learn it. How do we learn it? It's good to have teachers, of course, but we need to take our own place in learning. If we learn the commandments, if we learn ourselves and we teach our kids, our children, and we teach others, then everybody's on the same page, and then you really know what you're talking about. Yes, you can continue to learn with others, but you are your own leader, and you can start in your family. You can start with your kids, and you can start as a kid to be your own leader.
Can give you a very interesting example about what Nikki just mentioned about laws, judicial laws, and biblical laws, and what truly sets a standard for today's hierarchy and government. Everything is negotiable. Well, today in New York City, if you get robbed at gunpoint and you don't get shot, it's really not armed robbery. It's just a misdemeanor. It's an attempt to rob you. I didn't kill you, so I don't have to go to jail for 10 years. So it's everything's negotiable in legalities, in formal or local law. But I have a pretty I think it's an interesting story, and I hope you appreciate it. I had this guy I used to learn with. He's a local rabbi from the Russian community, and he didn't take what I do seriously because he's very practical, and he'd say, "Okay, Vladi, give me one of your things, your spiritual things." I say, at one point, I said to him, I said, Reb, you have an issue with your car. You're going to have an issue with your vehicle. He said, my vehicle's brand new. Well, I'm not going to have any issue. It's just, he was so stubborn to even accept that what I say might be even an increment could be true. So the following, I learned with him on Tuesday and Thursday. I come back Thursday, he says, hey, you're not going to believe this. I said, what happened? He said, I was speeding through Golden Beach, where the speed limit is 30. I got stopped. And because I was going 15 or 20 miles over the speed limit, my car got towed. And then I came back to my place. And in our community, there's something called an eruv. An eruv is a fish line that's pulled around poles to encompass the energy of the neighborhood so that people could carry on the Sabbath. We're not allowed to carry things on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to have an intention. So to prevent you from crossing that law, they encompass, they kind of they gather the energy of the neighborhood by putting a fish line around it. It kind of encompasses the entire neighborhood.
It makes it like a private domain, like almost as if you're in your house.
Whenever you see a synagogue, there's one, for sure. So he says, not only did my car get towed, the landlord of the place that I rent for my synagogue, he's a Muslim Arab, and he ripped down my eruv. I said, what do you think this means? He said, what do you mean? What does it mean? It means that my car got towed and the guy is evil. I said, well, what if we look at it in a realized way? Which means if I let him decide that I'm the only one that can see forward for him that something was going to happen to his car, and happenstance happened to his car and to his place of business, then nobody's responsible, and he gets to blame the evil landlord and the police for stopping him. But if we look at reality in a realized way, and we take the biblical parameters or boundaries seriously, we are to honor local laws. Why? It says 30 miles an hour for a reason. Speeding is greed, the desire to be somewhere other than where you are. More importantly, it's crossing a boundary, right? So you're not only stealing time from yourself, you're insinuating constantly that you need to be in the next thing, that this thing that where you are is not enough, and you need to be there in your destination. That's crossing a boundary. More importantly, I said, what does it mean to you that your landlord is an Arab Muslim? Oh, well, that's the enemy. He tore down the boundary. I said, no, it's you. You're the enemy. You're the enemy that doesn't honor boundaries. So your external boundary that you set for your community was torn down by an external person who represents the internal you. So those people usually that I mentioned before in the process where we were answering questions, especially folks from the Eastern Bloc countries that had communism, they reject boundaries. They desperately want to make God angry. And why would a God not want me to drive on Saturday and bring my kids to football? What does God care if I eat pig or I eat camel? It doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter because there's no guy in the sky. But all of these boundaries are to be observed by you and your internal desire to live at a certain vibration. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian, Catholic, Protestant, or Muslim. It doesn't matter. What matters is how you honor your vibration.
So you're saying that as we observe these boundaries and we curb the impulse of, let's say, eating, right, driving faster or eating things that we're not supposed to eat, it gathers our energy and it makes us stronger as souls. And in turn, it is the soul that drives the body. So as we become stronger as a soul, then the body naturally would become stronger and have a more connected path or a better guidance because we would be more connected to that energy part of us, which is the soul.
It would have a clearer path, and then we would become more effective as participants in our path. So then we have somewhat control over free will. Because now we're active participants. Everybody knows Nora Lily, my youngest daughter. She's 9. She comes from outer space. She, from 3 years old, she would eat, let's say, taco meat in a spoon. And while she's telling you that the turtles are flying by with camels on their backs, she would say, "Daddy, look, they're there, look." And everything would be on the floor. Anywhere she goes, it's Dennis the Menace times 10. She was known for that. Everywhere she goes, I don't know if any of you know, for those of you that grew up in the United States, it's Mr. Magoo. If you remember Mr. Magoo, everything would break around him and nothing would happen to him. And he would just keep walking. That's Nora Lily. And so at one point I said to her, I came home and she freaked out because she was eating pita with hummus and she spilled the hummus onto her shirt that she was supposed to wear to go out. I said, "Nora Lily, how did that happen?" "Well, Daddy, you never let me tell the story of how it happened because it wasn't my fault. It wasn't on purpose." I said, "Wait a minute. So if you tell me that it's not on purpose, then everything you do is without purpose. Then you set a standard and the precedence for everything to happen to you without purpose. But if you accept responsibility now and say, hey, you know what? I wasn't paying attention. I was talking to Emma, and that's how the hummus got on my dress. It spilled. I wasn't paying attention, which means I take responsibility, right? So the moment you take responsibility, well, then you have more control and you start doing things with purpose. But if you always insinuate that everything is not on purpose, then there's no purpose in what you do. And everything becomes without purpose. And so going back to what she said, Nikki, how should I refer to you? My wife, Nikki.
Nikki.
So what she's saying is that if you're willing, through your understanding of your respective Bible and your version of it, to understand that the boundaries are not intended for control, and there's no angry guy in the sky that's constantly telling you what to do, or he's going to punish or reward you. The observance is really of yourself.
But it's observance that gives you power.
Yes. So it gives you power with purpose. You become an effective co-creator of that which you desire instead of what you don't desire.
Wait, so you can look at it saying, okay, so all these laws and all these boundaries that I really don't want to do because it's too much or it's ridiculous, truly they're there to give me power, to make me powerful and make me stronger as an energy body. So
the whole idea is to bring, listen to this, to bring heaven to earth. Because we're living simultaneously in both worlds. And the only way I can fill out the space that I'm in, meaning be fully effective in what I'm doing and being who I am, is if I accept those boundaries, not in the simplistic way, but in a realized way, and say, it's not important for me to eat. I'll give you an example, my example for me. To eat mixed meat and milk. Why? Because it gives me acid. It destroys my stomach. It makes me heavy. It increases the acid level in my belly, which then drains my energy of my soul and I become ineffective. I have a stomach pain. I can't move forward. I can't function properly. So then why would I do that to myself unless I'm self-destructive?
So if it didn't give you stomach pain, but if you understood that it's a strain for the digestive system to process all this in your body, and instead of using the food as nourishment and drawing energy from this food, the food is drawing energy from you because you're having to spend so much in the digestive process to break down all this mix of things that was put
So
in your body.
we might have veered off course, but what you're saying is, look, most people are conflicted about if there's no guy in the sky, why does he care if I eat shrimp or lobster or meat and milk or swine? What does it matter? Who cares? Is he judging me for what I eat? Or even Buddhists that say, well, cows are sacred animals, or Hindus don't eat cows, right?
Right.
So cows are sacred animals, and vegetarians say we don't need anything with a face or a mouth, or eyes and a mouth. Well, then, if you accept the process, and really that's how you set a standard, by the way, getting back to being a leader, how you set a standard for your children in understanding that they're a vibrational body moving through a human experience is you engage them in understanding that they're a soul. Then when it's time to observe local laws, if nothing is sacred, right? I was raised and nothing was sacred. I was raised in the Soviet Union. There's no boundaries. There's no religion. Religion is poison. And of course, we grew up in a family where everybody tried to avoid the legal community, or police were bad, and everything having to do with laws is bad. And so when you have no sense of urgency and nothing is sacred, then you cannot say to a child who's 15 or 16, oh, don't do this. This is bad for you. They're not going to listen. They're not interested. Oh, well, I'll let them decide what religion they're going to be and what they're going to follow. That's not going to happen. When you give a child a menu, they cannot become effective and become a leader because they have nothing to lead with. Where does this standard come from? And why would they observe a red light and stop at a red light? Why would they not cross a boundary and not steal? Because nothing is sacred. Why wouldn't they, if they're in business, decide not to circumvent someone and take their deal? Because if nothing is sacred, what do I care? So what? So I go before this guy, I got there first. I'm going to make the deal. That's why we started this class, because people don't realize. They think, oh, well, they're teaching religion. We're not. We're teaching the importance of observance and understanding what the sacred document was for. I don't care what religion you're from. If you don't make something sacred in your children's lives, they will be followers on Instagram. If you make something sacred, understand that they're not defined by the size of their gadget. They're defined by their relationship with the Creator. What is the Creator? It's an energetic force that sustains your soul, and you have to have a relationship with it. When you do, you understand your path. If you have a path, when your light is on, then you can clearly guide other people on that path. But if you dictate to people, well, you're not honoring the First Amendment. It's negotiable. I could say whatever I want. I could have blue hair and be woke, and I could be, a socialist Democrat. Everything is negotiable. So what? What does that mean? Free speech. I could say whatever I want. You could say whatever you want as long as it's not hurting other people. That's biblical. The rest, the Muslims have a point when they say, oh, I don't honor anything but Sharia law. Why? Because in their minds, it came directly from Allah, from God. So they don't want to honor local laws, which is also inappropriate, because then they infiltrate and don't allow anybody else to live. They want everybody else to live based on their laws. The point of our classes is to help people understand, we constantly encounter this level of leadership. We met a guy on Saturday in the synagogue that said, I'm not going to send my kids to religious school. I want them to learn math, history, and science. I said, well, the difference is if you send them to that kind of school and they don't learn about God, they'll end up calculating their outcomes. If you send them to a school where they learn about God, they can learn about unlimited possibilities. They don't have to calculate anything. So if you draw your boundaries and your understanding from a conscious text that didn't come from a human, that came directly from a creative force, and you stop challenging it because you think that it's being imposed on you with some ridiculous boundaries and by an angry guy in the sky, you're misunderstanding the text.
So we can see it as it's really a divine text. It was channeled, and it was truly for our benefit. If we understand that we're not bodies before we're souls. We are souls, first and foremost, that come into this specific human experience. In this human experience, I have this body and these characteristics. This is my expression in this human experience. But in a different life, it's the same soul that comes with a different characteristic as a human being. So we are a soul that's eternal, and it continues to be. So if we make that a priority, and if we follow through and we fuel that soul, we understand that it is the soul that guides the body and not the other way around.
So then getting back to the topic, or the topic at hand, is leadership. If you live and set a standard for your children and your spouse by fueling your soul, then not only are you're leading by divine example, you're creating other leaders, other people that will lead with divine example. You're setting a standard. In my community, she sets the standard. I surrender into that standard because it elevates me. Her level of what we eat here raises my vibration. Her level of order raises my vibration. We have to walk for prayer on Saturday. It raises my vibration. So it keeps me completely immersed in a standard that she sets.
I think also the idea of you doing for yourself and teaching your children to do for themselves and not following. We go back to the idea of followers, not following somebody else. So I don't allow others to do for me because others do for themselves, and I have to do for me. I have to pray for myself. I can't allow somebody else to pray for me. It doesn't work like that. I have to take the action and fuel my own soul and my own body.
For the sake of leadership, I heard this. It's an old saying, but I heard it from I think he's a congressman. He's a black guy from Fort Lauderdale. He's brilliant. I think he's a Marine. He said, if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. And that's what makes great leaders in our communities. That's why this, I don't know who believes in what, that's why this socialist woke movements don't work, because everything is negotiable. You can be a man today and a woman tomorrow. You can be a kitty today, and tomorrow you can identify as a dog. I identify as a billionaire. And I'm 6'5" and black. That makes sense, no? Everything is negotiable. When you stand for something and you have an allegiance to a creative force, and you understand that this could never be a foot, we talked about this. This is a hand. I don't care how you slice it. It could never be anything else but a hand. And God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. So if you want, I don't care if you prefer squirrels, but I don't have to learn how to treat you because you prefer squirrels. And more importantly, if our leadership in our country leads us in that path, then it's obvious, it becomes evident that they stand for nothing. Everything is negotiable. And if you say that everything is negotiable, well, then you're insinuating verbally that this could be afoot, and then the creative force can't find its definition, meaning every expression of something has an intention, and that intention is defined by its name. If it's defined by its name because words create reality, or we verbally co-create reality and lead with our words, that's why you're listening, because I speak about something concrete, right? It has definition. It has an allegiance. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Well, if it doesn't and everything is negotiable, then you can be a squirrel today. And tomorrow you can be a beaver.
The Bible is also very clear in terms of leadership. If you follow the text and if you lead within the confines of the text, then there's no room for corruption. There's no room for in the judicial system, judges can be paid because there's a morality to it. There's an ethical side and correctness on how we live and how we lead. Whether it's a politician, whether it's a leader of a country, or whether it's a mom at home or a father at home.
In New York City, they say the best lawyer is the one that knows the judge. Why? Because everybody, you can purchase anything. Everything's negotiable. Because these people don't live within the confines of a higher standard morality. There's some really reasonable, good people out there that are judges and leaders for their country or their towns or their cities or their counties. But for the most part, when they realize that everything is negotiable, well, then they negotiate it in their favor, and that's the standard they set. And when you find those places where, like California, where this clown, could destroy in the most beautiful state in the country, that has a population of 50 million people and has a budget like a reasonable. Colombia has 50 million people, for God's sake. He destroyed the whole place because everything's negotiable. Everything's in his favor. I don't, God forbid, want to talk about politics, but it's depraved leadership because everything is negotiable. I can do this because it benefits me. And I can do it and mask it as if it's the right thing. And I can say whatever I want, and it'll be what it is that I say, because they understand that in people's minds. Someone asked me, I was talking to them about the Ukrainian and the Russian war, and the woman said, "Are you saying that the media is lying?" I said, "Lady, are you serious?" She was in her 50s or 60s. I said, "Is that a real question?" She said, "Yes, I didn't know that. Why would they lie?" So the point of this class is if you're a leader in your home, you're a leader for your children, you're a leader for your spouse, you're a leader at work, you set a standard for what kind of leader gets chosen to run your country based on the allegiance that you have to morality and conscious understanding. We set the standard. The reason we have what we have today, thank God, is because people got tired of wishy-washy, nondescript allegiance to whatever. Anybody can be anything, and you can identify as anything. And here we have, God knows what's happening to this country. If you have an allegiance to something and you have a morality and it's non-negotiable, it's part of the reason why we call what we observe orthodoxy, because it's non-negotiable. I can't do it halfway. I either do it or I don't do it. Yes, mothers.
If you say that we as people create our leaders,
Yeah, of
oh
course.
my gosh,
Yeah.
Romanian is in deep. Because we at this moment got us a
I know.
magnificent
I know.
president.
You like
Yeah,
it?
that he's autistic. He's
Yeah.
an Asperger's.
No, for sure.
So he has some issues,
So the country.
medical issues. And each time I don't watch a TV and everything because I'm an ex-journalist as a basic job that I did. Yeah.
Nobody
And
knows who's on this screen. People have no idea who's actually on the screen.
no.
There's some real serious people here. So
So when I was in my university, the first lesson that the dean told us was this: that okay, so you came to the faculty of journalism, right? Uh-huh. You want to speak to the people, to let them know the truth and what you found out and what you believe? Go write a book if you want that. If you came to journalism, that's something else. That's the first lesson that he taught us. Yeah. In a big theater with all the students in the whole year. Yeah. So from that point on, they started teaching us ways of manipulating people and masses and everything. And when I look at the TV and everything, all that I see is how they are manipulating people. So I stopped watching TV about 6 years ago. But from time to time, at least on the social media, I get to see little videos, short videos with our now president. And I have headaches each time I feel ashamed of his shame. I mean, his Biden was good. Yeah.
look,
So
brothers,
it's like his words that, oh my gosh, it's something. And he's
you and
young.
I have a mutual friend whose name I don't want to mention, and I've had
Mm-hmm,
extensive conversation about your government with him, and
mm-hmm.
he was deeply afraid that this would be so. And I understand the goal of this particular class about leadership was, if you want a different, in the former Soviet Union, they used to say, the fish starts smelling from the head. Why?
Right.
We set that standard. If you teach your children how to have morality based on a sacred text that gives them moral, emotional, and conscious boundaries, and they see everything as a soul, they grow up that way and they set that standard for their children. And when it's time for them to vote, they won't vote for a dude with a dress that wants to be a colonel and be woke. That's not going to happen. Why? Because they can see their light is on and they can see reality in a completely different way. So you
Yes,
being the leader.
I do this with my kids, but uh, I'm one, and my daughter's classmates are another 25 kids around her. And she comes home with some issues, some stories, and okay, mom, you're a black sheep. Okay, get over it.
Well,
Don't listen to them
we
because
all have children, and
yeah.
I can tell you that our children don't go to a religious school; they go to a secular school. But we set such a standard as leaders in our family. They know they have a sense of urgency because our observance creates a sense of urgency. They know that they want to go to a Halloween party, but when they go, Nor Lily, as nuts as she goes to every stand with candy and checks if the candies are kosher because that's her standard. That's what she learned. She loves Halloween and getting dressed. She asked me, Daddy, how come Jewish people don't celebrate Halloween? This is from my mother. I said, because we don't need to scare anyone. Well, that's a different standard. Your children will never develop an understanding if there is no consciousness in their understanding. And that consciousness is set by an order of observance, whether it's going to church on Sunday or them watching their father get on the carpet 5 times a day and pray. That's how they learn. They don't learn because you told them so. They learn because they see you doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have your understanding internally, that's not enough. So then this portion of the Bible that we're talking about clearly says, you can set a standard for leadership. But if the leadership laws are negotiable, then it's nothing.
But if you maintain these laws from source, from that original text, then it keeps you correct. And then there's no room for all this chaos, right? There's no room for negotiation and there's no room for chaos, which is what we're seeing in our society worldwide. We see a lack of order because it's been pulled, the generations after generation they have been pulled away from religion, but they really have been pulled away from order. They have been pulled away from the connection. And also the way religion is taught or observance is taught and presented to the people is not so palatable anymore. Nobody wants to be fearful of a guy in the sky. And then who's there anyway to see if I do it right or wrong?
I speak to a young man who's been coming for treatment and really become his mentor. And he's 32. He says, I was raised in Colombia. We were raised Catholic, and I'm a part of a church here. But it just doesn't have any substance. He says, most of my friends are between the ages of 25 and 40, and no one has a sense of purpose. It's not because Catholicism is bad, but because there is a standard that's set of a person in the sky or a person that they have to have an allegiance to or submit themselves to. And in the process of your emotional growth as a human being, you start to question if it's a person and there's a greater divine force and it's our leader, then why is there so much sickness? Why is there so much war? Why is there so much destruction? Well, God didn't create destruction. People did that. People choose war and rape and substance abuse and insanity. They choose that, literally. We choose to be defined by our diagnosis because that's what our leaders taught us, because they don't have a divine barometer. Everything is negotiable. So if you want to set a standard for leadership, it starts at home.
So ultimately, we need to take responsibility ourselves, and we need to start with ourselves, with this leadership, getting honest with ourselves, taking responsibility for whatever happens in our life, and understand that we are the ones that are constantly creating this, whatever it is, especially the things that we don't like. And if we understand that everything happens for good, then it doesn't really matter what it is. It always benefits us. Even the changes that we don't think are being good in the moment. Sometimes we get to look back and see. But as we go through life and then as we strengthen our leadership skills, then we become stronger ourselves and we raise stronger generations, stronger kids. And that in turn becomes a stronger humanity, and we don't have to live in this disorder and war and complete chaos.
We have New York City has a mayoral election coming up, and there is um, a jihadist socialist running for mayor in New York City. So, so people would say, how can this be possible? How can it be possible? I'll tell you how it's possible. My father came from the former Soviet Union. He loves being Jewish, but he didn't teach us or inspire us to understand God or consciousness. My brother is a socialist. That's who's going to vote for this jihadist. My brother doesn't want to work. He likes being a socialist. He wants affordable housing. He believes taking from the we should take from the rich and give to the poor. He's not interested in working and being inspired and being an entrepreneur. It doesn't make him bad. He's a great kid. But he had no allegiance to a morality and a growth process through which inspired him to be the best of himself so he could set that standard for his children. He's going to vote for this guy. That's how societies change. That's who chooses these leaders. That's who puts them in power. We do. They don't get there by themselves. So you have some clown who lived in a $2 million apartment in Manhattan. His parents are Hollywood directors. He's from Uganda, who has palatial estates in Uganda, but he wants to bring communism and jihadism to New York City. Why? Because that's the consensus. That's the general consensus of New York City. Wishy-washy, stand for nothing liberals who have no allegiance to anything. Everything is negotiable.
And they think that's the cool thing to do.
Yeah.
That's where they're following. That's what social media dictates.
We want to be accepted because purple hair works. So, any questions? Mariana, you missed the answer to your question.
You know what happened? I was waiting Nikki to say, go ahead, the Zoom is on. I am in a wedding, all dressed up with my husband, and I came to the garden to see the Zoom, and I was waiting for the signal, get in the Zoom, and the signal never came.
So we recorded the answer. It's in the beginning. No, we didn't.
I'm so sorry. I waited for this all the week.
I'll call you and give you the answer privately.
I did not negotiate this hour. Not even for a piece of beef in the party. But I want to say something.
Please.
I see, because I've always been in psychological treatments until I met you, that being black or white is wrong. You need to be in the middle. And what does being in the middle means? Everything is negotiable. You got to feel okay. You got to be comfortable. Where did we reach with this? My daughter, bulimic, she stopped eating, and then she binged, and then she vomited. She was taught by the best psychologist that being fat is okay. Accept your body. Accept not wanting to do exercise. Everything is fine. You are okay. You are perfect. You're beautiful. But what happens afterwards? If you accept that, but if you don't have a leader who says, okay, it's your body. You have to accept it, but you have to do the best. She became very, very, very fatter. She became feeling worse all day, every day worse, until I went to Vlad, and I could teach her that she needs to do the best. It's not negotiable to look after your body. Even her psychologist said, if you feel bad in the stomach, then you should eat anyway because you feel like eating. And I said, yes, because if you don't eat whatever you want, you are restricting yourself and you're going to be worse. Well, the last days, she felt she had problems in her stomach. And after seeing me doing that, she started doing a carnivore diet for a week without me saying anything, because I do that when I feel bad. And she said, Mom, I understand that this is the way. And I say, there's no way out. No one's coming to the rescue. Only you. You have to be strong. That's the key. That's the only key. You need to be strong. You don't need to say, oh, I'm not eating because I want to be beautiful. I'm not eating because I want to feel okay. And my body is my only companion forever. That's all I want to say. Psychologists suck.
Oh, look.
That's the key of being a leader. Taking charge, being strong for yourself. Really not following whatever others are doing and saying, but really taking charge and doing it for yourself, for love for yourself.
One of the disclaimers in the beginning class was the fact that we're not interested in converting anyone, or we don't want to be like everybody else, giving you a line that you can't really, that's not palatable. But just so you know, we set a standard ourselves. We do have peace in our lives. We have an observant life. We do yoga. We train CrossFit. We kickbox. We do all kinds of things to stay sane and elevated, because life isn't easy. But it becomes easier when you're connected and you understand that you have to have a personal relationship with God. Then you set a standard, not by being a follower, but being a leader. You set a new standard in the way you perceive reality. If you tell your children it's negotiable, you're not really setting a standard. You know, I was married before.
Never.
Sorry, never happened. But the mother of my older children would say, they'll figure out what religion they want to be. No, they won't. They will not. Because I set a standard in their lives. They call me for advice, even though their mommy's brilliant. Their mommy's awesome. But she doesn't give them advice. They call me. They observe things from my religion because I set that standard. They know how to perceive God from me because I set that standard. So now I didn't create followers. I created 2 more leaders. When they go somewhere, it's not negotiable. They stand by what they believe. They're not screaming, even though their mother is a liberal, save Palestine. They have an allegiance to something. And they stand for that, no matter what. It's not negotiable. So if you set that stand, I don't care what your belief system is. If you're Christian, just be Christian. And introduce your child to Christ consciousness. Read about it. Make them understand what God is. What is it to be Christ-like? What it means to have morality, what it means to have consciousness. Then they won't look at the world through a lens that's soiled by materialism and the rest of these yahoos that are trying to run us into the wall. You won't be defined. Your children won't be defined by hypochondria and constant diagnosis, because then the medical community doesn't become an authority. God is an authority. And whether it's Buddha or Christ or Moses, what they believe stems from a divine force. And they're not defined by a human authority that insinuates that you may have an expiration date, and because you have this condition, there's no repair for you. It's not true. It also
Can I
has.
say something?
Please, of course.
About what you're saying, when my dad got cancer, eventually died anyways, I became obsessed. I had few years after his death that I became obsessed with cancer. So I got to this guy, Chris work. He lives in US, if I'm not wrong. And he has this site, Chris Beat Cancer. And there he said at some point that if you want to save yourself from cancer, you have to get on the driver's seat. Because if you sit next to the driver, you're dead meat. So you have to get there on the driver's seat and see where you're going. And he made this whole concept of I don't know, a set of things that you have to do, from nutrition to religion to sports to breathing to everything. And after that, he saved himself and he saved a bunch of other people. So I think that's what we have to do. We have to take the driver's seat and see where we are going, and not let our power in the hands of the doctors when you are sick with something. I don't know, let anyone else on that driver's seat. You have to be there for your kids, for your health, for your husband, for your business, for everything. You have to be there.
Thank you, love. Thank you. You know that in the 1980s and 90s, Volkswagen, that was their motto. In the road of life, there are passengers and there are drivers. That was their commercial. So we're going to wrap it up. Anybody have questions? Any other comments? Going once? Going twice? So see you next week. We promise to make it realistic and practical and loving, and we can always find the recording on YouTube. Thank you so much for coming by, and
thank you too.
All the best.
Promise to have another good question.
Please send questions. They're really interesting. Whether it's personal, I promise not to make it your personal session out of respect to everybody else. But send a question that everyone can benefit from. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.